Odell Beckham Jr. Going at wide receiver 45, overall 107. That's around the 9th round. Tom, he is 30 years old, tore his ACL all the way back in February in the Super Bowl 2022. Have his injuries made him fantasy irrelevant? What do you think, man?
Well, everything is at cost, of course. So where he's going in drafts right now is you're not spending all that much. ADP wide receiver 45, 108 overall. He has a long injury list. We're talking over 16 injuries, and I'm referencing Draft Shark's injury list here. A number of which he's missed substantial time for. We got an ankle fracture, 2 ACLs, and many other things. And he's 30 now. Age is not working for him anymore. What is working for him is that he's had 1.5 years, probably more, since his surgery. So from an ACL standpoint, which we remember him tearing it in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, he's 100%. And we've seen that in his videos. He's run around just fine. But Beckham has not been an elite receiver since 2016. I think a lot of us just hold on to him because of how special he was those first couple years. And my goodness, he was one of the most fun receivers I've ever watched play. Like, I remember that catch. I was sitting in my room watching it, and I just screamed. And my roommate at the time came running in. He's like, what happened? What happened? Something going on? And I'm like, bro, you got to look at the TV. And that'll always be one of the best catches in NFL history.
Absolutely awesome.
But hasn't been elite since 2016, has not been a wide receiver 15 or better since 2018. So I don't mind where he's going. I just think you have to temper the upside expectations. I would much rather, in a similar ADP, go for either of his two teammates who have higher upside. Rashod Bateman, we'll talk about in a second, and glowing reviews about Zay Flowers.
And also probably the coolest name ever, just Zay Flowers. Absolutely awesome. But
freaking awesome name.
Now, with Odell, you referenced this perfectly, Tom. What you always talk about is age and prior injury, and you basically nailed it on the head, right? I mean, you shout that from the mountaintops all the time. Prior injury, Odell has a ton of them, and age, he's getting up there, right? I mean, there's a lot of things to factor in. He did just get a 1-year deal. I think it was something like 12 or 15 million with a lot of incentives.
Pretty substantial.
Yeah, it was a good one. Now, you also referenced that he hasn't been good in many years. Since 2017, Odell's finished as a wide receiver 2 or better one time. It's legitimately been 6 years since we've seen him dominate and be fantasy relevant. I mean, he could be a guy for the Ravens, I think, who can flash and have some big games. He could also be a guy that you pick and you drop him, right? You get rid of him going in the 9th round. I'd be okay taking risk and dropping someone who I get late. 9th round, I'm still trying to kind of, pad my team here. I mean, talked about Zay Flowers, Bateman. I like them both over Odell with their ADP. Listen, Odell could be the 4th or 5th best option on his own team when you bring in Andrews, Dobbins. I mean, don't fool yourself. Around him, I like to try to give alternatives. I like a lot of the other guys that, like we mentioned, Zay Flowers is going right around the same ADP. Sky Moore hearing really great things about in camp. Even Cortland Sutton, I think. Elijah Moore, Quentin Johnston. These are a lot of guys that are going somewhat near him. Cortland Sutton, I think a little bit earlier, but these are a lot of the guys going around him at ADP. Now, before we close up on Odell here, did you see what he said recently in an interview, Tom?
Something about he would have had 250 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl.
It's all talk.
That's as Odell as it gets. You got to love it.
It's so Odell. I love that little competitive flair that he has and the swag. But he said, people have no idea what I was actually going to do that day. It was going to be the day where I catch 15 balls, maybe 250 yards. The game plan was for me, said Odell. We would have beat him 42-17. And then Tyler Boyd came back and said, I think he tweeted at him, said, woulda, coulda, shoulda. For me, I think that wraps up Odell's career pretty well. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. And I think that when you guys out there, at least my opinion, when you see his name, I'm passing on it. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. I'm going for somebody else.
I think we all have that friend who's like, man, I would have made it in the NFL or the NBA if it weren't for that injury. I could have thrown the ball 70 yards if I didn't tear my rotator cuff or something like that.
I have a bum knee. I had that shoulder. I was playing college. I probably would have been drafted if I just didn't have that shoulder. Everybody's got one. He's one of them, man. Sad story, I guess, over his career there with all these injuries, but man, he was fun. I'll never forget just the catch, yes, but just watching him as taking slants to the house. Quick slant, Eli Manning, boop, gone up the field, 80 yards.
It's nothing.
It was unbelievable for sure. Let's go to his teammate, Rashod Bateman, going right around the same pick, guys. We're looking 11th round here. Wide receiver 51, really young, 23 years old, a Liz Frank sprain. I need answers, Tom. Should we continue to be patient on Rashod Bateman? What do you think his outlook is for this year? Let's talk a little bit of injury analysis first.
Yeah, history. So 2 years in the league, missed 5 games with the groin his rookie year, missed 10 games last season with the Liz Frank injury that needed surgery. And typically that's about a 6-month to return to full play. He's at month 9 now, and we know that there's been some setbacks when they removed the screws. There's some inflammation, irritation in the foot that required a cortisone injection, which is not standard. And sometimes that there's people that their biology, they just swell more. They have more inflammation, more irritation, more scar tissue. There's no way to know that until they have some kind of procedure like this. It's not necessarily their fault. It's not their fault at all, actually. But that does tell us that he's a little behind on the timeline. Now, the good sign is that he returned to practice yesterday. And while there's only in a few short videos, he looked really good. He was cutting hard. He was cutting quickly. He looked confident, no hesitation. But with this type of situation, with the irritation, inflammation, whatever you want to call it, that usually takes repetition to come on. So I don't know that I would necessarily expect one practice to be an issue. So we're going to have to monitor him really close over the next 2-3 weeks before draft season really kicks off. And if there are more issues that come about, then I'm really raising red flags, because this is a midfoot injury. The midfoot is so involved with anything we do in weight bearing, especially running, cutting, and jumping. So if he has another setback before your draft, then he's definitely at risk for setbacks throughout the season, like this to continue to flare up. But that's not necessarily going to happen. That's why we need to very closely monitor the reports out of Baltimore over the next few weeks. We saw Travis Etienne had pretty much the same injury, and he looked great in his first year back. So it's certainly possible that Bateman could just pick up where he left off. We know he's super talented, super fast, but definitely from a risk standpoint, for injury risk standpoint, more elevated than any of the guys that we've talked about so far. I am definitely concerned, but that concern could go down if over the next few weeks everything is smooth sailing. And the nice thing about Bateman is there's not, from a draft capital standpoint, you're not spending much on him. Looking at ADP of like receiver 52, 131 overall, that's not much of a risk from your building your team draft capital standpoint. I do expect his ADP to rise quite a bit, though, since he just returned to practice last week.
No doubt could see him as a guy who rises in ADP. Like we just talked about Odell, 9th round, I'm not willing to take the risk, but now it's all, guys, you got to play like the stock market, right? Like who are you going to get value on? If Bateman is sitting there in the 12th round,
take him.
I'm not mad because then if that's the case, year starts and nothing's going on 6-7 weeks in, you drop them. It doesn't crush your team like it does to pick one of the guys like this in the 7th, 8th round. So I do think you're getting for a discount. I think a lot of people are running out of patience with him. I mean, 27th pick overall in the 2021 draft hasn't really lived up to it, but there's still a lot of hype around him. Tons of talent. There is a little bit of a crowded receiver room, Odell, Flowers, who we discussed, Andrews as tight end. It's going to be hard for me to pull the trigger on him in the 10th round. But again, 11th or 12th, I think it's pretty fair. Like Tom said, activated yesterday, right?
Yesterday,
from the pup list. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'll say this, if his ADP was quite a bit higher, like 6th, 7th round, then my concern level is much higher, because from an injury risk standpoint, I'm pretty somewhat concerned with how long it took him to come back from this injury, Also had missed 5 weeks in his rookie year with a groin injury. Like both of those are lower body injuries, which we don't like to see. He is young though, which is in his favor. So if his ADP rises too much, like past round 9, I'm probably staying away.
I'm with you. I think this is something that, Tom, you'll definitely monitor. You'll be tweeting about this. Again, that's why he's a great follow, just throwing plugs out here left and right at you. But it's true. These are going to be things that you're tweeting out. We'll take a look at him. Got about a month till the season starts.